Natural Order Podcast, Episode 14. Welcome to the Natural Order Podcast with your hosts, Ryan O'Leary and Adam Haman. Natural Order Podcast, back again. Brian O'Leary here with Adam Haman.
Hello, Brian. How are you today?
Well, so Adam's coming off a recent appearance, I guess, because it was on video too, on the Bob Murphy Show, episode 292. And
yes, Bob throws the exceptional ones up on his YouTube channel as well, and I made the cut.
there you go. And so I was listening to it last week, and it got me thinking. And so I did a podcast on what Adam, or it actually wasn't even what you guys were thinking in the show, but you offhandedly mentioned Jack Handey, or Bob did maybe, from Saturday Night Live. And of course, you know, Adam knew exactly what Bob was talking about, or maybe you brought it up and Bob knew exactly what you were talking about. Can't remember offhand, but you can go into that more in a second. But I was like, man, everybody I knew back then knew who Jack Handey was. And Jack Handey, I thought until recently was just like a character they made up on Saturday Night Live, but no, he was a writer that was on there for years, and but everybody knew who he was, and maybe in this generation that's not the case. And so my podcast kind of went in. I'm like, well, Saturday Night Live, I don't really know anybody on the show anymore, hardly. I don't watch it, but I'm sure a lot more people do watch it than they watched it back in the 80s and 90s, and maybe even the 70s. Like they had, that show had a few really stark periods of where it was really successful and part of the cultural zeitgeist. But anyway, so I was kind of lamenting the fact to some degree that I didn't know. And, even though more people probably watch Saturday Night Live than ever before, it's just as a percentage of the culture or the population, since we've grown tremendously, probably in the last 30 years, hundreds of millions of people, probably 100 million, whatever it might be. It's just, there's more things, right? There's just more things to offer. So, and then we were chatting, Adam and I, and we said, I got some ideas that I want to throw by you, why you might feel this way. So I don't know what these ideas are, and Adam is going to maybe pepper me with some thoughts.
Well, let me start off by noticing that in the content creation landscape, I guess we're part of that. You just never know what your audience is going to take away from what you create.
Yeah.
And here Bob has me on to ask me a poker theory and strategy related question.
It's a 2-hour podcast, and I pick out a 10-second
movie
thing
about with Robert Redford about Havana, and we talk about the Libertarian Party for a little bit, and then we dive into some esoteric concepts about epistemology and knowledge and certainty and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. And
then Brian hears that and goes off on a podcast of his own about Saturday Night Live, Jack Handey, and baseball, and why we don't like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, it just goes to show. I mean, the podcast was great, and it's much longer than what we typically do on this show. But we'll see how this one goes. We don't really have a time limit on this one, but we'll see how it goes. And
no, it was great. I hope people check it out. We'll put it on the show notes page, the Bob Murphy Show on his own website and on YouTube.
Yeah.
But you were saying you were sort of, what would you call it? You weren't lost in reverie exactly about the past, but you were talking about the passion you used to have about things like Saturday Night Live and baseball.
Right.
And that's changed over time.
Yeah.
And maybe if you remember what your thesis was there, I have some hypotheses for why that might be, but why don't you set the floor?
Well,
set the table.
I guess I was just trying to figure out in my head why these things aren't as important as they once were. Granted, I'm much older, certainly, and as far as baseball goes, that's all I wanted to be. And, as a child was a big league ball player, and, so I knew all that stuff, but baseball's been part of my life and part of just the fabric of my life for forever. And to some degree, Saturday Night Live was, a certain age started watching it, not too young, but, throughout high school and college, certainly it was part of the deal. We used to sit around and watch Saturday Night Live on Saturday nights, like late into the night. And it was part of the deal, but not so much anymore. I haven't watched an episode for a long time, and maybe perhaps the style of humor or the political tilt they've taken is just, and maybe I think that's off. Really, perhaps the same thing with not only baseball but just a lot of the pro sports leagues and stuff.
I know what you mean. And as
Yeah.
you said on your podcast, you used to like set the timer and get to the TV and make sure you watched a game, maybe every game. And now it's like you could take her to leave it. And
Well, yeah, that's an interesting thing because I have the ability now to watch pretty much anything I want to watch at any given time, pretty much, except the movie Havana. You said it was very hard to find.
It's hard to find.
But I've seen it. I watched it years ago. And, but yeah, like you can watch any of the streaming platforms, free or paid. There's so much content out there. And it's almost all like pretty good. The sports stuff, it's pretty easy to find. And there's a lot of it. And it's just like maybe back in the day, having to search for that stuff was part of the deal. Like I read a lot more about the games and sports whether it was in the morning newspaper or Sports Illustrated or the sporting news that came every week and you get a recap of what happened, or like the little clip shows that are on for half hour per week, whether it's baseball, This Week in Baseball was one, the NFL Films Presents or whatever one of those.
Sure.
And it's like,
so suffice it to say that something has changed.
Something has definitely changed.
We're going to be using SNL and baseball.
Okay.
But I think for the listener, and for myself, you could substitute anything.
Right.
It's clearly the case as time has gone by, my interest and passion for certain things is just not what it used to be.
Yeah.
So,
but I would also argue that some things have increased severalfold. Passion.
Sure.
Passions.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. So listening to your podcast, I came up with 7 hypotheses for what might be going on. So we're going to go through them rapid fire. You take notes, and then we'll discuss which ones you think hold water and which are just nonsense.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1. These things just suck now. They used to be worth obsessing over, but now not so much. Quality is diminished. That's 1. And I'm giving these to you in no particular order.
Okay.
I don't want to sway you.
Yeah.
Second, you are older now, and therefore you have more pressing concerns. So just a time issue. Number 3, you are older now, and your brain is full. It's full of knickknacks, all sorts of things and are interested in, and you simply don't have the room in your limited cranial space for trivialities like SNL and maybe baseball. Here's my 4th one. Back then, when you were younger, there were less entertainment and sports media options, so almost everybody watched the same stuff. Like back when there were only 3 major networks and a few scattered locals in your area, everybody watched the same thing on TV. But as you were mentioning earlier, now there's this massive explosion in the kind of content that you can watch and where you can get it from. So maybe your attention span is just busy with all these other things. Number 5, you are older now, and your tastes have simply changed. You sort of intellectually say you still love baseball, but is it the same feeling as you had when you were younger? And was the quality of your interest and care, has it changed just because you're older? Number 6, it's about maybe there's less cultural cohesion. Because there's all these different media and entertainment options, is there a splintering of society that you have fallen into as a phenomenon? And is it natural? Is it a function of the increased size of the country now between when you were younger? Or is it not size at all? Are there unnatural forces promoting cultural disunity?
Mm.
I mean, I don't know if that has anything to do with baseball. Maybe it does. It probably has something to do with SNL.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself, I stopped watching sports, the few that I did watch early in 2020, just because I was just offended by what they were doing on the
Right.
field. There was the BLM stuff, but before that, they were doing military crap I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started having these healthy young, 20-year-olds wearing masks on the side of the field. I just didn't want to watch it anymore. I was just over it.
Yeah.
And then the seventh one, maybe similar to the others, is you are older now, and therefore you are more able to see these things clearly that you used to like. They haven't changed. You have. Your values have, even if you don't recognize it.
Okay. I think they're all valid to some degree. I mean, it's kind of like what I touched on at the top. What struck me on number 6 when you're talking cultural cohesion and perhaps a splintering of the culture, that struck me because I also see this in music.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably happened. This started happening probably in the 90s, I'm guessing, where the radio was the place where you went for your music most of the time. The top 40 or alternative rock, classic rock, country, maybe R&B stations or whatever. And then you have the outliers of like classical music and jazz, which have their, unique, they're smaller but passionate fan bases. So those are always there and still are there actually. But as far as music goes, I would listen to everything, like everything. And it started, I think, like I said, in the 90s where country music kind of changed, became this more pop based country music, and it was very entertaining. And it's kind of my wheelhouse of country, even though it's probably not my favorite era. It's just like what I know the best. And a lot of it's just frankly like garbage, but it's kind of fun. And same thing but I would go back to the 1980s. Like you go look at the top 40 charts and you have British, American, R&B, like and then maybe in that same era where you had the kind of the country music starting, the rap also started and kind of took the place. So it became a white black thing almost, which is really strange and kind of depressing to me because I didn't really care who what, but who was singing what. I like, and I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm like, God, and it came up somehow this name came up a couple times in the last few weeks for me. Random name, actually, probably if you think about it, but Anita Baker. I don't know if you remember Anita Baker. She was just awesome, and I loved her singing. Probably still do, but Anita Baker would never get airplay today, even though she's got just tremendous voice, great songs. Just like you just feel good about listening to Anita Baker like one person. And I don't know where she fits in today's world. And I was thinking about like, good grief, like the whole Taylor Swift phenomenon is going on now. I like that. Talk about cultural splintering. This has splintered pretty much everything in the culture. This woman, I don't even know the appeal of her.
I don't even know
I don't even know her songs.
Nor do I care.
No.
But what you said gave me an idea. It used to be back in the day before MTV, you'd turn on your radio, probably only at a handful of stations, and then they'd play something.
Yeah.
And you'd pick the genre that you liked. Country would be different than rock, which would be different than classical and jazz or whatever else is out there. But you would experience the music just as audio, and you'd either like it or you wouldn't. Then because we exploded into video, and then eventually, the internet and all these other forms. Not only are you experiencing the music, but you're getting the whole essence of who these people are. So you can be turned on or turned off by the look and the feel. Like you said, rap. It's a splintering of black and white. Well, if it's just audio, maybe you don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you, see something, if you've got some sort of racial preference or a cultural preference,
Mm-hmm.
something about what the person is doing while they're singing their song could offend you or attract you. And that wouldn't be the case on radio, right?
Yeah. And I liked a lot of the late 80s, early 90s rap, just like I liked the country music. But I stopped listening to country music really around, the early 2000s probably or new stuff for the most part. Unless it's like some weird subgenre of like rock, like rock and roll country kind of melded together. But the top, well, whatever, it's not top 40, but essentially that kind of station with popular country, I don't even listen to it. It's grating on my ears. The same thing goes with the rap music. Like, I just don't understand like how people like this stuff anymore, but they do. And more people buy this stuff than ever before. And it's more popular within certain realms of, like pieces of the culture. So, and getting back to baseball, I guess maybe it was where you wanted to go on this whole topic. The numbers say that baseball is the most popular it's ever been. Most popular it's ever been now. We have more children playing youth baseball. You have more revenue, more attendance than ever at the major league level. And that doesn't even move the needle for me anymore. As a old school baseball fan, I was like, oh, great. Like, this is awesome. Great developments. More kids are playing, more people are watching, and they're making more money than ever. The players are making gobs of money, and it's like it just doesn't hold a candle to what I grew up with. And a lot of the players are frankly better. They're better. Not all of them, but the game itself to me is much different. I mean, we can go into that. I mean,
But what changed? It's either the game or it's you. And I think it's worth exploring
yeah,
because I think it's kind of universal. I don't think you're the only one.
It's a little bit of both. We talk about the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. I would probably say it's 80% game, 20% me. I don't know. I definitely have changed. I am older. You got more things competing with my attention. And but the same thing goes with all pro sports. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and the Portland Trailblazers were a legitimate part of the culture in that city. Everybody knew all the players for the most part. We didn't even have home games televised on television like they do now. Every game's on television. We had to listen if we wanted to know what's going on in the game. We had to turn on the radio and listen to Bill Schonely do the play-by-play. And if we were lucky, there'd be a nationally televised game on the weekend, and then once the Blazers got in the playoffs, you could see them on TV, and that was huge. Like, oh wow, we got to see all the road games or most of the road games on television, but you can never watch the home games unless you went to the game itself, or occasionally there were closed circuit television at movie theaters for some of the bigger games, and so. Like, you had to buy a ticket, and nowadays you don't have to buy a ticket. You buy, for a nominal price, you can watch all these games, and you pay $100. I pay $100 a year, and I can watch or replay 90+% of every single Major League Baseball game that was played. And if I was a kid, I would. That sounded like the most awesome thing ever to me. For $100.
I wonder if it would have if back then you actually did have that ability to watch everything. You might have got overloaded. I think what's going on is mostly a crowding out effect. Like back in the day, Saturday Night Live was what was on, and so you watched it even if half of it was just garbage.
Yeah.
and you watched it even if the cast members changed and they weren't your cup of tea. But now there's so much that you can watch. It seems like a massive error, waste of time to watch something that, like, before I'd quit football and basketball, in disgust in 2020, I was already resentful of how much time of my week was just taken away by these things.
Right.
I was playing fantasy football and, watching every Sunday, and also then it would be Monday night and Thursday night. I mean, it's a lot of goddamn time that I'm spending watching this stupid sport. And it's a great sport. I love it.
But you love.
But I'm 3 years clean and I don't miss it at all.
Mm.
And I think, so again, it's a crowding out thing, because the reason I don't miss it is I've got so much that I'm interested in that I can now consume on TV, radio, podcasts, satellite radio. And let's not forget books. I used to read all the time. And I still read more than anyone on my block, but it's like a tenth of what it was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I'm right there with you.
It just feels like such a waste to spend a second or a minute on something that you don't think is valuable.
Yeah. And if it's not valuable, I come from this whole childhood that was sports. I didn't understand why you wouldn't play sports all the time. My motivation for going to school for the most part is so my folks would let me play sports. Until I hit college. And then, in college, that was a eye opener at first, but then I kind of, dug in and did the schoolwork and got out of there. But, and then I took, kind of a few years off where I was not really that into sports as much. It was always there, but, different passions. I got really into fly fishing and really into it, and that took up all my time. And now I go fishing a couple times a year, maybe. But it was the same thing.
Takes a pretty small hook to catch a fly, right?
Yes, it does. And that might be part of the problem. I was having trouble catching the flies. But I do have one of these bug assault things now where you put the salt in like a rifle looking thing. It's pretty awesome. But anyway, but yeah, so different passions. Now, I mean, and when we do this podcast, I would never thought that I'd be podcasting. There was no such thing, right?
Right.
There's no such thing. And then realized, like, oh man, I really like doing this. I like talking out ideas and doing all this stuff with good people. You included.
Amen, brother.
At ReRaiser on Twitter. You can find more. Trying to encourage you to do that more. But but yeah, I think that, this thing, doing podcasts and, really trying to figure out what this culture and where it's headed, and putting a lot of my time and energy toward figuring that out and possibly for providing solutions for people. That's taken up a lot, like you said, like the time, I am older, but and the time commitments have changed. However, we can still do a lot of things. We're not just limited to podcasting or talking about libertarian concepts or whatever. That's boring in and of itself too. At a certain point, if you get too much,
my feelings.
Well, if you get if that's all you do, like, I think having a broad swath, but like I guess how you're saying, back then you had less options. So the options you chose, most everybody else chose them too, just by virtue of there not being a whole lot of things. But now I can go right now, or after we're done, I can post a 30-second video that goes to all these social media channels. People could watch that or not. But I spend the time doing that. It's like anybody can do anything. Anybody can do a podcast. We just do it better than others.
Oh no, you're not wrong. There's really something too about the splintering or the proliferation of other options for people's attention. There's a song by the band called Five for Fighting.
Yeah.
I think it's called Slice, and it's really beautiful. Maybe we'll link to it in the show notes, where he opines about just the change. We all used to go to the same place on Saturday night, and the concerts that you go to were a big thing because you couldn't get music any other way. And now you turn on your computer and internet connection, and the whole world is available to you. So rather than connect with your local community and your family, even you're finding some sliver of thing that only you and maybe 1,000 other people in the entire planet are into. And so you spend all your time there. You find your community there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some good aspects of that are great, but we also clearly are losing something.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe as we mature as a species, we'll find the balance there. Because you don't want to,
possible.
Mark Zuckerberg can go to hell. You don't want to dive into virtual reality and only live there. That's empty,
Yeah.
Real life still has valuable things you don't want to lose.
I would posit this also. And I think maybe who clarified this for me was possibly Brian McClanahan. I'm not entirely sure, but it's one of the podcasts I listen to on a regular basis. He was saying, or whoever this was, saying that the United States was probably more united at any one point, other than maybe after the Revolutionary War, soon thereafter, and for probably 5, 10, 15 years after World War II ended, or during and after World War II. The nation came together. There was a real sliver of that after 9/11, but that ended very quickly. I think it had lasted for a few weeks, not a number of years. And perhaps that is part of the rub. The little petty grievances that people have with each other mushroom into big grievances. We see it now in politics in particular. I mean, you just see, like, all right, if the guy has an R next to his name or a D next to his name, people just automatically reject that person. And even within your Libertarian Party, it's not a cohesive movement necessarily, even though you're amongst the leadership trying to perhaps provide that. But within the libertarian sphere, there's also a lot of like people that reject this other person or this other philosophy just because it doesn't meet up with some litmus test that they have for being a libertarian. And that is like a microcosm of the culture at large, I think. Scott Horton on Tom's podcast the other day, he's like, you got 130 million Republicans over here, 130 million Democrats over here. You got libertarians in the middle, about 1 million maybe, give or take, and then they're all fighting with each other too. So I don't know where you go with that.
Well, you just outlined something that's a big, I don't know if feature is the right word, but a big aspect of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it bears closer examination. Us being, as a country, most united after World War II and after 9/11 shows that our species comes together and unifies after fear, pain, and rage. And those, I submit to you, humble listener and co-host, are not the ideal ways for us to unite as a species. We should be able to unite on a positive vision of some kind, right? A set of values, raise our eyes up above the horizon and seek something to aspire to and unite around that. I've never been a believer, but I think Christianity was, an attempt at that. I think the Enlightenment was also an attempt at that, to try and find something positive to hold as a unifying vision. The desire for peace and productivity, thriving, flourishing as a species, that could be a thing we could unite around. But I mean, what you said is obviously true. Our species or our country is the most united when we hate somebody and we're afraid of them.
Right.
And that is, yes, it unites us, but it's not the best way. I don't think we want world peace and unification because all of a sudden we're fighting off invading hordes of Martians or whatever.
Yeah.
I think we should understand that dichotomy or disparity and aim towards the positive. Because if we don't, then the only time we're going to be united is when we're experiencing deep fear and hatred and rage, and that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like in a big umbrella, that those ideas and thoughts need to move forward. I don't see it happening in the short term. I think stuff like this, like just talking about it and getting out there in a measured way, right? I don't think we're firebrands by any means. We can be, both of us, but we're not firebrands in the way that gets ratings on Fox News or MSNBC, where all you do is throw insults at the other person. But that's entertainment, and people flock to that, and they think they're getting some intellectual discussion when it's really not. They have 7 minutes
that's empty
to fill.
Calories.
They have 7 minutes to fill a segment, and then they move on to the commercial. It leads right into the commercial, and they get paid for that. And
that's empty calories for your head. That's not
right.
You're not learning anything.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you can, there's some people on there that will say good things and the right things, but that gets drowned out, like in a big way. And I just don't know, where to go with that, because you have this kind of whole power structure that is not only political in nature, but also within the mass media, where, again, it's just power and money, and it's not the ideas. And even in the schools these days, it's not necessarily money, because, well, it is to some degree, but not at the scale that we're talking about with politics and media. But it's power. It's power over, like, telling these kids how to think in a totally insane manner. And, I saw news this morning as we're recording that in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, that the teachers were going to go on strike. It's like, yeah, get it. You need to make money, but like in the whole scheme of things, this is the biggest problem. What I find with the government schools is that they're negotiating against the same people that are their benefactors, and I just don't know where you go with that. But I mean, that's a little off topic, I guess. Perhaps off topic of Anita Baker, Saturday Night Live, and baseball, which we need to stay.
Well, it all fits as long as we title this episode, "Hey, you kids, get off my lawn."
Right. And it's not really. I mean, I don't even feel that way. Like the old man yelling at cloud or "get off my lawn" type thing.
I don't either.
I really don't.
I don't either.
Because those people were bitter for some reason. We don't know why. Like, we don't really know why they're bitter. They have, like, other things going on. They're not concerned with culture. That typical guy. But anyway.
No, well, I don't know what makes him want. Right. Maybe he just really loves his lawn.
Yeah.
One of the white pills about all this is also the cause, I think, of the reason you don't like baseball or SNL so much anymore. It's that proliferation of options. It does mean that the gatekeepers that used to hold us back, those cable TV idiots, used to be only 3 channels. And then now we're talking about how old school it is that you're talking about cable TV at all, because you got the whole internet. And I think that's great. The fact that Joe Rogan has, more influence than Bill O'Reilly ever could have hoped to, that's a good thing. Maybe the gates are still up, but the fences have been knocked down. And who knows what is going to rise up in the hierarchy of this decentralized freedom and capture the attention of, millions of people. Right. Somebody like Lex Friedman or something, or Dave Smith, or, who knows? But the options are.
Could be at the
It would be
vanguard.
bad if it was. Yeah, it would be bad if the gatekeepers were calcified, ossified, and you had to hope that they would die or bribe them or take control. But you don't have to anymore. Just go around them, and I think that's ultimately pretty encouraging.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, maybe we are at the vanguard of the revolution as far as all that goes, because you see like the death, essentially, of this former culture, or at least an edifice of a culture, with all the things we were talking about, and now you have, like you said, largely, or things are becoming more decentralized in some way. But a friend of mine sent me something this morning. I gotta find it here. So again, going back to Portland, Oregon, and the schools, or this is the state of Oregon. The headline from the Oregonian this morning, yesterday, said Oregon again, because they've done this before. Oregon again says students don't need to prove mastery of reading, writing, or math to graduate, citing harm to students of color. And that kind of exactly. Great reaction, by the way. Because
that's delightful.
Yeah, they're just lowering of expectations to graduate. But I guess the point of why I brought that up is that we have these decentralized ways to move around this idiocy, and just like, yeah, I want my kid to read. I want him to do math. We do that every day around here.
I've been saying for decades that it's very stupid to ensure something so important as the education of the children to something as obviously bad as a government monopoly.
Right.
And people would say for years, well, you just must hate kids, or you must hate education. What's going to happen? These kids aren't going to be able to read and write. And then cut records scratched to today, and the school officials saying what you just said.
Yeah, no, it's insane. So I guess, to my point about the teachers' strike, is like, what are you striking for if you're not going to do your job? Like 98% of the Portland teachers voted to go on strike starting at the beginning of November. If they don't, I didn't get as far as what their demands were. I'm sure it's more pay, but like, what are you teaching them if the standard...
What makes you think they're not doing their job?
Well,
who's the customer? Who's paying them? It's not the parents.
Not the parents. But if the standard...
So what's their job?
If the standard is that you don't have to be able to read or write or
That's right.
do math...
That's correct.
They are living up to that standard.
You have to have the right ideology. The customers are paying for that. And by customer, I mean the state.
Right.
I mean, these teachers are doing their job. We're just still confused. We're believing the myth about who the customers are.
Right.
It's not the students and it's not the parents. Customer, the piper calls the tune. I forget that. I mangled that saying, but you know what I mean. Whoever is paying is the customer.
Yeah. And I think people whistling Yankee around here, and they're just
he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Yeah.
There.
And the schools, I went to the government schools for, 1st through 8th grade. It was like you didn't really know any different. Most of your friends that's where they went, and that's the way most of it is today. There's the private schools. We were having this discussion last night at the dinner table, and it's like, well, so if they're asking for more money, the teacher, they have to get paid because it's insanely expensive, and getting more insanely expensive due to inflation and other things, for these teachers to be able to afford to work, really, or live even close to near where they work, especially where I am. And I said, yeah, but so they need more money. So that you think like going down the block and say, oh, we need an extra 20 grand per house to make the schools functioning again. They're like, no.
Well, look, dude, this is wildly off topic for Jack Handey.
Yeah.
But there's no way in the world that you can point to a system that is monopolized, where there are no choices, there is no market mechanism, and then tell me that the only thing that's going to fix this is if I jack your taxes up and pay more.
Yeah.
That is not demonstrated. That is not in evidence. Free the system, free the people. And let's just see. I have the sneaking suspicion that you will get a much better education for everybody at a drastically reduced cost.
Right.
Just a guess, but I would bet heavily on that.
I would too. So let me tie this up a little bit. And you mentioned the marketplace, and talked about marketplace of ideas and the marketplace of education. What struck me with all these hypotheses, getting back to Jack Handey and baseball and all this stuff, is there really a free market in all that stuff? Are we really allowed, or are we more allowed now to choose something? Is that the free market at work, or was there no real free market in choices, or is that just a wildly esoteric?
Well, a free market is a concept. We've never had one.
All right.
It's a spectrum. It's more or less free, more or less statist. We've never had a free anything in this country.
Right.
But my argument is that the more you go in one direction over the other, you're going to get better outcomes.
Do you think we're moving that way?
I think Corey D'Angelo, what's his name? Corey DeAngelis in the school choice movement is doing well. It's a step in the right direction.
Uh-huh.
But the culture and the political will overall is going in the other direction. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm not optimistic.
I think what, like you're talking about the school choice and the there's more children in homeschool than ever before, perhaps, or probably before the pioneer days, as a percentage, but certainly as a sheer number. But like I said, with the baseball, it's like, yeah, you're going to get more kids playing baseball if there's more kids. You're going to get more homeschoolers if there's more kids, just.
Well, I think the percentage is way up too. I think it's up over 10.
Yeah.
And that's just a symptom of A, the failure of the monopolist system, and B, the recognition finally of the parents as to how bad it is. That's one silver lining of this COVID nonsense response. Is that parents got to see inside the schooling in a way they never did.
Yeah, and I guess getting back to the World War II 9/11 analogy, it's like, well, we were kind of united in seeing a lot of these things that we never saw before, but everything's fine again now for the most part for these people. Yeah, we don't
get off my lawn.
Yeah, no need to apologize for what happened. It sucked then, but we're just don't worry about it. We're on the right path now. It's like the lessons, by and large, were never learned, even though we had the opportunity to see a lot of these things. I think our show, our movement, in some broad terms, is pointing that out, and I just recommend. That you sign up for Tom Wood's School of Life, I guess, where we first met Adam. BrianDeLeary.com/TSOL, and you can see what we have to offer there.
All right. Well, I think we've said it all. I do encourage people, if they're still with us, to go check out my episode with Bob Murphy on The Bob Murphy Show on his YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. It's fun. It goes all over the place. And Bob is real smart and funny, and I'm me. So check it out.
Yeah. No, it's a great episode. And all right, gang, we will talk to you down the road, and have a good week or weekend whenever you're listening to this. Take care. Bye-bye. For more, head on over to naturalorderpodcast.com. For today's show notes, head on over to naturalorderpodcast.com/ep14. That's naturalorderpodcast.com/ep14.